Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, I can hear you now, but it has been restarted, I think, the webinar.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you now.
Something happened, I was logged out and then now I am joining again. Yeah.
Yeah.
Me also.
The participant have again rejoining. Something happened, automatically switched off. Sir, share your screen, Amar sir.
Yeah, I'm just opening it.
Anybody from the participant side, is the sound audible to you all? Hello.
Hello. Yes, I'm hearing you clearly.
The participant, the attendees. Sesha sir, are you there? Hello. Hello.
Hello. Yes.
Yeah, but I don't know whether the sound is audible to all.
Manoj, are you online?
Yes, I can hear you. And Saina also, I can hear.
Mari?
Manoj sir, can you ask?
Everybody is
Somebody
fine. Saina, please start the webinar and proceed. You all set.
Okay.
Don't delay
Okay,
further.
sir. No, are the participant able to hear the sound?
They will be hearing. Don't worry.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to webinar number 4 from ISACA Muscat chapter. Thank you very much for joining in. As you know that today we have a webinar from Mr. Amil Jamil. He has been one of a great contributor to our Muscat chapter, and it was a great loss that he had left us. But again, through the webinar, we can connect to him and we can again enjoy his session. Without any further delay, we'll start the proceedings. I will request our president, Mr. B.B. Joseph, to give a brief way forward, and then we'll proceed on. Biju sir, over to you.
Yeah. Assalamu alaikum and good evening to all of you. A warm welcome to this fourth webinar of this year. In the wake of this coronavirus spread, we will be resorting to this webinar for the time being. And we have our great speaker, Mr. Amir, with us. He has been a very great supporter for the chapter in giving CPE programs. And we sincerely thank and we are grateful to him for agreeing to conduct this webinar today, even though he is away from Muscat. Really, we really appreciate them and thank him. And we welcome Mr. Amil Jamil for this webinar. We also welcome all of you to this wonderful session of learning experience. Over to you, Saida.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Though he does not need any introduction, but as a formality, an introduction is enough order. So I'll just give a brief of Mr. Amir's work and what he is doing so far. Mr. Amil Jamil used to be here in Oman, Muscat in ITA, and he's got 2 certifications from ISACA Muscat chapter, CSAM and C-Guide. And Mr. Amir is an IT governance evangelist. He is helping boards and executive management in ensuring values from IT-enabled investments. He had a great and a long varied career in IT governance, digital business transformation, ICT strategy development, and information or cyber risk management. He's been described as trusted advisor with strong strategic and analytical skills and has a track record of guiding business through transformation process and ensuring value in business investment in IT. The hallmark of his success is through communicating a clear vision, gaining support from stakeholders, and have team members sing from the same song sheet to push towards an ideal state. That's amazing. Currently, Amir is director at GRC Simplified Limited, London, UK, assisting client organization on information and cybersecurity management, providing IT audit services to client organization to determine whether IT controls, project corporate assets ensure data integrity and align with the business's overall goal, providing thought leadership to persuade and inform stakeholders with diverse interests to reach consensus on complex and high impact subjects associated with cybersecurity and digital disruption. He is active member of ISACA and has served at the board of ISACA chapters such as Karachi, Muscat, and regularly speaks at various seminars and forums regarding information security and IT governance. And today we are really honored and we're lucky to have him among us to impart the lectures. We had enjoyed his past lectures a lot, and I'm so glad that Mr. Amir had agreed to join us again and share his valuable experience with us. Thank you so much for joining us, sir, and over to you for the session.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this ISACA Muscat chapter webinar. Today we are talking about auditing cybersecurity controls. So without any further delay, let's start the presentation and the session. So, okay. Yeah, agenda today will be like we will be having a brief intro of cybersecurity like terms before to keep everybody on the same page because cybersecurity has a different understanding. People have different understanding with cybersecurity. Then briefly we will talk about cybersecurity controls, and then we will be discussing the internal audit's role in ensuring cybersecurity in an organization. So if you move to the glossary of terms, like first of all, first thing is cybersecurity. What is cybersecurity? For that cybersecurity. But for the sake of same understanding for this webinar, we will be referring to cybersecurity as the ability of an organization to protect or defend the use of cyberspace from cyber attacks. Okay. I think this is the very straightforward and simplified definition to refer to cybersecurity. Then, what is cyberspace? So the cyberspace is basically defined as the interdependent network of IT infrastructures, and it includes the internet, telecommunication networks, computer systems connected to the network, embedded processors and controllers in critical industries. So this is how we define the cyberspace. And when we move to cyber warfare, this is another term that is being referred to and used very frequently when it comes to discussions about cybersecurity. Cyber warfare. It is basically the use of computer technology to disrupt the activities of a state or organization, especially the deliberate attacking of information systems for strategic or military purposes. So we have seen a lot of cases that can be categorized as cyber warfare or cyber attacks related to cyber warfare. The most prominent and most discussed was the cyber attack on Iranian nuclear plants. So that's how basically the technology is being used to disrupt the activities of state and organizations. So that's what we refer to as cyber warfare. The second thing, or the most important thing, is like how would you differentiate between cybersecurity and information security? So I take it, and a lot of other professionals also take it, as cybersecurity is 95% of information security. And it is not that information security is a different thing and cybersecurity is a different thing. Information security includes security of information on non-digital media as well. So that is the differentiator. Like when we talk about information security, we talk about information as a whole in an organization, whether it resides on digital platform or it resides on non-digital platforms. And when we talk about cybersecurity, since the word cyber is basically related to the internet and all the interconnected devices and networks or applications and softwares. So cybersecurity focuses on information on the digital form only. So that is why it is very evident that we can safely say that cybersecurity is basically 95% of information security. I was reading through the recent report published by Verizon on recent cybersecurity attacks and the investigations they have conducted. So now the thing is, like most of the times in the market, when people talk about cybersecurity or when they basically arrange to put controls for cybersecurity management, most of the times people basically rely on or focus their activities or efforts on the controls, digital controls, like putting a firewall, installing a SIEM solution, and then there are a lot of advanced concepts that are being used, and they forget to basically follow the basic information security or security principles. Like for example, we are not talking only about the digital infrastructure. It's a very common phrase that is being used in this domain, that people are the most or the weakest link in this whole equation. So most of the times when organizations suffer breaches or incidents related to security or cyber security, if you investigate it, it starts from the people element. Usually the biggest breach starts from people element. People make a mistake, no matter how strong your defense mechanism at the digital platform is. When the human is compromised, hackers, because as the technology is enhancing and developing, hackers are also developing their methodologies and approaches to hack into or to compromise systems. So, and people are the most common element that they use to compromise any secure environment. So now that's a brief differentiation between cybersecurity and information security. If we move on, it's like there are different myths associated with cybersecurity. Like for example, it's all about IT. Most of the investments will be in technology. That's what we have been seeing when people prepare themselves for cybersecurity defenses. There is no ROI in security. Cybersecurity is one-time project. The documentation myth. So these are the myths that are prevailing in the market. So let's talk this one by one. When we say it's all about IT, there is a scenario on your screens, like there is a disgruntled employee, and he has privilege to administer the systems within the organization, and if he basically intentionally disables core application or deletes the most important database, or he basically put any if he is not happy with the organization, and if he tries, because most of the times the system administrators are basically enjoying the highest privilege available to them, and there is usually no check and balance on their activities in the system. So if he makes any what you can say, want to harm the environment deliberately, there is no one to stop him. And it is not basically the IT issue. It is not about the technological or digital controls that you have put in your system. It is basically the human resource issue. So information security will not play, or information technology or the controls that you have put on the technology will not play any role to basically safeguard this kind of mishaps. The second myth, most of the investment will be in technology again, since it is not only the technology that will ensure security of your environment. So if you are putting all your investments in technology, it will not basically going to benefit you. At the end of the day, when you investigate any breach, if you investigate any incident, you will find out that your technology controls were not compromised just because they were not strong enough. They have been strong enough, but there are other elements that needs to be taken care of. The security, that is another thing. Like most of the times when you talk about when you talk to business and when you ask for the approval, budget approval for the project to ensure cybersecurity or to put controls in cybersecurity in an organization, so most of the times the business usually sees is that there is no ROI in this investment. There are so many reasons. Like I have been dealing with the organizations from the governance perspective, and the problem is like it's basically the situation or the what you can say, the responsibility lies partly on the technology or IT people and partly on the business people. For the IT people, like whenever they prepare their business cases for investments in IT, whether it is related to cybersecurity or it is related to any other IT aspect, the most of the times the business cases I have seen is basically they talk technical jargons and they fail to map the benefits of that investment, because you are asking for investment from the business, and when you ask for the investment in IT, you fail to map it back to the business objectives and business strategies. And that is why business people do not see any benefit in this investment. And you, most of the times, IT people leave it to the business to understand like how it is going to support business. That's why most of the times business people make this statement that there is no ROI in security investments or IT investment as a whole. So again, the whole idea of cybersecurity is to decrease the cost related to the security incidents. That is again a business cost. And if you manage to decrease the impact of security incidents, you will save money. And in most cases, the savings achieved are far greater than the cost of safeguards. So you will profit with cybersecurity. Now, based on these three lines, like these 3 points, if you prepare your business case for cybersecurity investment along these lines, of course, it will then you will not face the statement or the remarks from the business that there is no ROI in the security. You have to work on these in these lines, and you have to basically present it and convince the management that whatever investments are being put into security arrangements, they are basically going to return. So the fourth myth, which is cybersecurity is a one-time project. No, it is not. It is an ongoing project because there are so many things. Like you have to update your procedures and policies, you have to update your software, equipment, technology is changing. Every day there is a new technical development. Then the hackers are also working alongside and they are improving their approach. As the controls are being improved, the hackers are also improving their approaches and finding ways to basically work around those enhanced controls. So it's an ongoing activity and it's an ongoing journey, and you have to basically keep a close eye on how the market is changing and how whatever controls you have put in place at the initial stage, are those controls still effective enough? You have to go through this exercise on a regular basis. It's not a one-time project. The fifth myth, the documentation. Right, writing a pile of policies and procedures does not mean your employee will automatically start complying with them. This is the most important issue, and again we are talking about the human aspect in the whole equation. So no matter how strong your policies are, no matter how strong your procedures are, how strong your digital controls are, if you have not given an awareness to the employee, like what is their role in ensuring or implementing the policy or securing the organization from cybersecurity incidents or breaches, you will not be able to basically achieve your objective. A simple example is like password practices. Most of the times people keep like simple passwords just for the sake of memorizing it. Now there are so many things, like now you have at the what you can say infrastructure level or at the application platform level, you have the controls available that you do not allow simple passwords. Now you can restrict the minimum length of the password, and you can basically restrict them to basically use alphanumerics and special characters and all those things to make the password strong. Now from the system perspective, in the system you have defined the policies that and nobody can basically put a simple straightforward password. But what will happen next? When people are not allowed to keep simple passwords, they will write those complex passwords down, and again that will open up another what you can say vulnerability in the system, because it will be difficult for them to remember the complex passwords. And then it's a logical thing, because there are so many platforms, there are so many things an individual is dealing with, and an individual has to maintain multiple passwords for multiple platforms and applications, and it will become very difficult to memorize each and every password. So usually people write it down and make it very obvious in their workplaces. So this is basically another thing, like writing a documentation is not enough. You have to provide awareness, and you have to work on the change management. You need to introduce this change. You need to change the behavior of the individuals in your organization to comply with the documentation. So now let's move on to some facts on cybersecurity. Like globally, cybercrime was the second most reported crime in 2016. So initially, the nature of crime was different, and now the crimes that are being conducted globally has changed, and the second most reported crime is become cybersecurity or cybercrime. In proportion to the total number of crimes, cybercrime is now accounts for more than 50% of all crimes in the UK. That is another fact which is reported by National Crime Agency. And in 2020, 25% of cyber attacks against enterprises will involve IoT devices, source Gartner. So this is another prediction, because IoT is evolving with a very fast pace. And the problem with IoT is that the sensors and the devices that build up this IoT Internet of Things network, they do not have security in their design, inbuilt. So all these sensors are prone to breaches. They have vulnerabilities and can be compromised very easily, and which is with a very fast pace, basically taking up to the cyberspace. A lot of devices are connected to the cyberspace, and these devices are vulnerable. So that's why it is predicted that most of the cyber attacks will be basically through IoT devices. So now, recent incidents like Facebook incident has been very prominent. In late September, Facebook has suffered several breaches, with the worst seeing at least 50 billion users compromised. Then Marriott Group, we have seen incident with Marriott Group at the end of November 2018. Marriott admitted it had suffered a massive data breach affecting the records of up to 500 million customers. Like then British Airways, on 6 September, British Airways informed its customers that details from around 380,000 booking transactions had been stolen, including bank card numbers, expiry dates, and CVV codes. So these are some of the major, and it's not that the cyber crimes are only reported in 2018, though I am sharing you 2018 because data or facts, because these are the prominent one that have a global impact. If you look at different reports, every year reports have been published on cybersecurity incidents, and you will find that a lot of customers A lot of organizations have suffered cybersecurity attacks in 2019. Even we have just started 2020, but still in 3 months there are so many cybersecurity incidents reported and breaches as well. Okay, so now what is the impact of cybercrime in growing the economy, across the economy? Cyber risks as real and dynamic. So you should not basically say, you cannot say that cybercrime is not associated, or I am not prone to cyber attack. Since the economy is changing, since the global environment is changing, so no organization can say that they are not they cannot see the cybercrime, or they cannot be the victim of cyber breach. Then you have to take the behavioral changes seriously, because again, we are talking about the human behavior, so that needs to be taken very seriously. Then recognize cybersecurity as a precondition for operating. Yes, if you are operating, if you are connected to the internet, if your organizations, if your applications are connected to the internet, cybersecurity should be recognized as a precondition for operating. Before starting your operations, you should be well prepared to handle cybersecurity related issues. So that was basically the brief introduction about what we can say cybersecurity, and now we will talk about cybersecurity controls. So the basic question is, what is a control? So usually controls are referred to as the mechanism by which specific business activities are monitored and directed. Okay. And in order to achieve goals and objectives, management needs to effectively balance risk and control. So that's another important issue. You need to balance the risk with controls. You cannot implement, or you cannot put controls that does not justify the risk. And it is also basically another point which links back to the ROI aspect, because if you know what your risk is, what is your annual loss expectancy, your controls should be appropriate to that loss. So most of the time what we see is the practitioners, cybersecurity practitioners, they want to basically implement the best of the best solution available in their organization to avoid any security breach. And in this effort, the most of the times the investments in cybersecurity controls cannot justify the risks the organization is exposed to, and ultimately it will basically hurt the ROI equation. So whenever we are planning for controls, the controls needs to be basically balanced with the risks the organization is facing. Then control procedures needs to be developed so that they decrease risks to a level where management can accept the exposure to that risk. That is another important thing. When we talk about control procedures and when we talk about the risks, the risk should be evaluated first of all, very thoroughly, and then it has to be communicated to the management, and then you should have an agreement from the management, what is the level of risk management can accept. Because one thing is for sure, that you cannot eliminate the risk, any kind of a risk, not only the cybersecurity risk. You cannot eliminate the risk. So the risk is going to be there, and the only thing is you can only minimize the impact if that risk is exposed. There are multiple techniques to basically handle the risk or to mitigate the risk. Sometimes you transfer the risk, sometimes you avoid the risk, sometimes you manage the risk by putting the controls, and sometimes you just only accept the risk. So this exercise has to be performed in association with management, so that management has a very clear understanding what the risk is, and up to what level they can basically accept the exposure to the risk, and to what level they want to decrease the risk which is not acceptable. Now, the components of internal controls, ISACA defines internal control as the policies, procedures, practices, and organizational structures. So these are the basic components of internal control through which you basically control the environment. At the first stage, at the top of the list is the policies. You should have a policies in place in the organization to basically control the risks. Then to implement those policies, procedures should be developed appropriately so that the people can practice or implement those policies or to comply with those policies. Then practices in an organization needs to be enhanced or updated. If you look at these controls or components of controls, internal controls, it basically gives you an idea like we are talking about an environment, the control environment. Okay. So about creating a policies. In an organization, it is easy to basically develop a policy. But the most difficult aspect in implementing this policy is to basically handling the impact or the change, managing the change in an organization. That is basically that will be the resultant of implementing any or issuing any policy. I have seen many cases where organizations have developed very effective policies, but still they struggle to implement those policies, or they struggle to basically achieve compliance with those policies because again, we are dealing with the human element, and it is very difficult to change the human behavior. And if you just develop the policy and rely on the policy itself, it will not going to help you, because the compliance, you will struggle at the front of compliance activities. To implement the policy effectively, you need to basically manage the change across the organization that is going to be there. You need to manage the behavior of the organization, and the most difficult part and most time consuming activity in this whole scenario is changing the behavior of the human. So you need to change the culture of the organization, and to do that it takes a lot of time. You can implement a very robust and very effective digital control in an environment, but when it comes to controlling the human behavior, it takes a lots of time. So if you are, again, since we are talking internal controls about in the context of like cyber security, when you are dealing with cybersecurity, whatever policies you have defined, whatever procedures you have defined, you need to dedicate a lot of time in basically creating an awareness and spreading the word across the organization about how individuals are playing. Like each individual has some role to play in making the policy effective, or to ensuring ultimately the cyber security of the organization. So unless people understand that, like most of the times, like if someone is sitting at the reception only, for example, like it is very difficult for the person to imagine or to realize by himself or herself like what role the person is playing in ensuring the cybersecurity. So there are so many different like roles across the organization that will not be able to relate to those policies. So a lot of efforts needs to be made to basically categorize the individuals in the organization into different categories, and then you need to give them awareness like how they are basically, what is required at the first stage from them to comply with the policy, and what role they are playing, and how they can be an instrument for a cybersecurity breach. So this is how you basically implement policies, procedures, and practices. And Sometimes you have to change the organizational structures as well, and you need to assess your individual organization, like what could be a risk related to security. It's not only the vulnerabilities of the system only, because you need to think about organization structures as well and the practices prevailing in the organization as well. So finally, to provide reasonable assurance that business objectives will be achieved and undesired events will be prevented or detected and corrected, this is basically the objective of internal controls, putting internal controls. What is a control environment? So basically, collection of integrated processes designed to deliver value to stakeholders and provide reasonable assurance regarding the achievement of a specified objective. This is what we refer to as a control environment. And the objectives include effectiveness of the controls, efficiency and economy of the operations, reliability of management, and compliance with applicable laws, regulations, and internal policies. So this is how basically you will create a control environment, integrated processes designed to deliver value to the stakeholders. How do you ensure, or how do you achieve the basic objective of a control environment, that is effectiveness? For that, you need to basically monitor the effectiveness of your controls or your control environment. And by monitoring, like when you monitor, you need to measure as well, like what is the maturity. Like for example, we have been talking about human behavior. So it requires a lot of like efforts, and it will change over a period of time. So you need to keep a very close eye on how the maturity is improving in the organization when it comes to human behavior. Then whatever controls we have put there, efficiency and economy of the operations as well, that is another thing. Like sometimes we put so many stringent controls that decreases the efficiency of the system. So again, when we talk about security, ensuring security, the objective of security is not to basically for the business, it is not that the security is the primary concern. For the business, the primary concern is carrying out business activities. So whatever, yes, security is a risk and it has to be handled effectively. But if you put on a lot of efforts and put on a lot of emphasis on robust controls, sometimes it affects the efficiency of the systems or the operations itself. So if this is happening, the business will suffer, and that will certainly not be required, will not be appreciated by the management. Like for example, I can give you a small example, like to prevent data loss. There are so many solutions available that basically keep track on how the data is basically moving on the systems, and you can prevent like what can be copied, what cannot be emailed and an attachment, whether you will be able to copy it on the USB sticks or not. But the thing is, like when you implement these kind of controls, usually they are referred to as data loss prevention systems or controls. These systems put a heavy load on the infrastructure or on the network. And I have seen personally in one of my clients' case where they suffer a huge security breach, and to basically mitigate or to as a control, they implemented a data loss prevention solution with a very heavy price. And they had about 2,500 computers and laptops and or the equipment on their network, corporate network. And they started implementing it. The way these DLP solutions work is basically they implement or they install their agent into each and every PC across the network to basically monitor the data movement. Now, when this agent started deploying, when this system started deploying its agent on each and every PC. Up to that point, it was fine. But when this system started to basically keeping track of data movement, the whole network choked, because it started gathering, like, because you see, like when you install any system, this kind of system for the first time, they keep track, like they start learning like what kind of data movements happening on the system, and they it start creating or learning itself, like what is legitimate data use and what is not. So before coming to the point where it stops the data movement that is not seen as acceptable use, it has to go through a lot of data gathering activity and exercise. And that particular, on that network with my client, when it started gathering this information, the whole network choked. For 1 week, they keep on struggling with this situation. And then finally, it started hurting the business so badly that they decided to basically turn this feature off. So they have made huge investment in acquiring this solution. They implemented it without realizing what will be the impact on the network, what will be the impact on the business. And ultimately, what happened is that the management sees this investment is useless and waste of the money, because it did not deliver any value, or it did not deliver any result in that organization. So we have to be very careful, like whatever controls, whatever approach we are taking to control the environment, it has to basically consider the efficiency and economy of the operations, business operations. Then the reliability factor of management is very important, and compliance with the applicable laws as well, because you see now there are so many regulations available. GDPR is something which deals with the privacy of information. So if you are collecting information, you have to consider like what kind of information you are restoring, whether you have taken clients or the information owners consent, how you will be using it. Then there are so many other things, other regulations as well, like related to the availability of information, like for how long the information should be available with the organization, how to deal with the archiving of the information. So there are so many in different industries, in different environments and geographical regions. There are multiple laws and regulations that basically govern the use of information. And when we talk about information and cybersecurity, we have to be very careful, like whatever controls we are putting, whatever arrangements we are basically making to control the environment to ensure cybersecurity, those arrangements have to be complied with the available or relevant laws and regulations. So now, what are the control practice areas? When we talk about control environment, there are different practice areas within a control environment. Like the first thing is controlling. The practice of controlling provides the objectives of and benchmarks for comparison and ultimate measurement of performance. Then we talk about risk management. The risk management process should inform the enterprise what controls are needed to bring the risk to an acceptable threshold. So that is the second practice area. Then quality management, very important. The reliability of information is a function of quality management, and the internal control environment must be designed such that quality of information is considered and managed to a sufficient degree. So yes, again, securing information is the primary objective, but reliability of information is more important, because that is being felt on daily basis throughout the operations if the information is not reliable. Then when we talk about auditor assurance, the control environment that provides the means by which the assurance function can base its reliance on any and all underlying information and systems. And of course, the information security, like information security seeks to safeguard the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of enterprise information. And information security management system must have reliable data to affect the required controls as determined by the enterprise. So these are the control practice areas, 5 control practice areas through which we achieve our objective of securing an organization against cyber threats. Of control, internal controls. It's an hierarchy within an organization. Like stakeholders delegate their needs to the governing body, who then take ownership of those requirements. Cybersecurity is an issue which has been now discussed in board level, at the board level, in the board as well, because there are so many cases reported where the main the prominent risk is cybersecurity. So now boards have started discussing about cybersecurity. They are concerned about cybersecurity in their organizations, and there are different regulations which basically makes the board responsible for ensuring cybersecurity among other elements as well. So that's how the control cascaded down to the lower levels. The governing body remains accountable. They are accountable ultimately, and they have to direct the management to plan, build, run, and monitor the controls required. And then ultimately management instructs and aligns operations to execute those controls and report their results. And the results are monitored by governing body, who then reports on their accountability to the stakeholders. So that's how the ownership of internal controls work at different levels. Now, what are the cybersecurity control specifications? Control design is specific to risk posture and right processes and people to manage the control. These are the two specific perspectives of control specifications. Like the control design is specific to the risk posture is very important. You need to assess your risk very thoroughly. You need to have a very clear understanding with the management, like what is acceptable for them, up to what level you have to basically control the risk. So whatever control environment you are creating, whatever controls you are designing to mitigate the risks, should be appropriate enough to basically satisfy the risk posture. And then to implement those controls or to make those controls effective, the processes, the people who are managing those processes, the people who are maintaining those controls, like should have the skills and capability to manage those controls. We can classify controls into 3 different categories, like administrative controls, technical controls, and operational controls. So administrative controls are basically related to putting the policies in place, reviewing the procedures, making the users aware about their responsibilities towards the security or the control environment. Then we talk about technical controls. These are the controls which are basically very common, like putting a firewall or installing a SIEM solution or endpoint security or whatever it is. So most of the time we see that when we talk about information cybersecurity, people usually put more of their efforts into technical controls, and they focus on acquiring technical controls and implementing technical controls. And most of the times the administrative control area looks very weak in an organization. That's why organizations suffer cybersecurity breaches despite the fact that they have implemented a very strong technical controls. And then there are operational controls as well. Like, for example, when we talk about operational controls, like delegation of authorities, like access to information on need to know basis. So if everybody is having a same level of access, then everyone is within the organization is having access to sensitive or insensitive information, that is basically related to operational controls, and that has to be taken care of again. Now, what are the goals of security program itself? So basically, when we talk about security program, this basically highlights the importance of handling the security at the program level. So security should not be dealt on ad hoc basis. Like if you are basically only concerned about putting technical controls in an environment, and you feel that you have identified the risk and you have put the technical controls, and then now you are safe, you have a safe environment, no, you will never be able to basically avoid any security breaches unless you basically dealt with security at the program level. And you should have a very clear goal for your program. The primary goal is to limit the attractiveness for the attackers. When we talk about cybersecurity, when we talk about internet security, the primary goal is to limit the attractiveness of the attacker. If you achieve this goal, then you should basically think about how you will be restricting that access to your crown jewels or your data that is basically the subject of cybersecurity. So the attractiveness decreases as the investments are made in cybersecurity control. That is another part, but you need to basically think about, like, it's not only the technical control that will decrease the attractiveness of an attacker. There are so many other things as well. So the information should be available at the first stage. Like, for example, the information should be categorized, the information should be labeled properly within the organization, because if every information is available to everyone, that is like, it's very easy to compromise that information within an organization. So that is more important. That will help to basically understand the attractiveness of the attacker, and will be able to basically decrease or limit the attractiveness of the attacker as well. And then you should put some controls, cybersecurity controls, to basically decrease the attractiveness or to achieve this goal. Now, in what are the areas where you will put your investments? The most important thing is awareness investment. You need to invest in awareness. You need to invest time, and you need to invest in people's awareness. Then policy. If you should have policy in place. Like, I have seen so many organizations where the policy is a set of policy that they have developed for their information security management or security program management are not effective enough. It's not like easy to basically define a policy unless you understand the requirement of the organization. And this requirement is very diverse. Like, every organization has different requirement towards security or from security. You cannot copy paste the policies from one organization to the other organization and feel that, and assume that those policies will be effective enough. So there are so many elements that needs to be taken care of while defining the policies. Like, for example, BYOD, bring your own devices policy. Everyone these days is carrying a smartphone which is capable of basically running any computer software or program. These devices, smartphones, have become so powerful in processing that you do not need a computer or a laptop or desktop at all. You can run each and every corporate application on your mobile phone if it is allowed. Now the question is whether it is allowed in an organization or not. That's something that the organization needs to basically assess the risk associated with, because and the capability the IT management team have to manage these kind of devices for corporate use. So you should be very clear, like whether you are allowing personal devices in your corporate environment or you are not allowing. Then most of the times I have seen that people have been accessing corporate emails on their phones without IT and knowing that who is accessing mobile corporate emails on their personal phones, because the systems are integrated and if the controls are not there, like if mobile device management application is not running and you do not have the capability to control the mobile devices in your organization, you will never be able to know like what are the devices accessing your corporate information. So you need to basically assess this, and you need to define policies properly in your organization. Then, of course, introducing the detection system, that is part of the technical controls, and this is what most of the time we see, and most of the organizations have these kind of capabilities. But first two, like awareness and policies, are usually lacking in organizations. Then we talk about event logging. This is another area where you need to basically put your investments in, and you need to log event. Then there is another fact associated with this, like you cannot log each and every uh, event in your environment. Technically you can, but it is not feasible to log each and every event. Now, what events you have to log and what events are not what you can say required, or will not be delivering the value, or will not be helping you much to achieve your security program goals, it is up to you. And that needs a study. Like you need to study what kind of environment you are basically maintaining, and what are the critical areas where you need to put where you need to log events. For example, like I have given you at the start of the presentation the example of the privileges network administrators have in their organizations. So now, for example, this is a very important thing, that there should be a mechanism in an environment to basically create, to not only log system administrators activities, but to basically ensuring that those logs remain secure, because system administrator has the most privileges in the system. It is if the system administrator has malicious intent, the person can perform any malicious activity and then change the log as well, because he has the rights. So there should be some controls, like what events should be monitored, and whatever the logs are being created should remain secure. And there are multiple ways available to ensure that events are logged and the logs remain secure. Then incident response is the third most important area where people lack their maturity. Most of the times, either incidents are not reported, either incidents are not reviewed in an organization, because you see, there are sometimes it is very difficult to encourage an individual, a human being, to basically report an incident, because you see, it depends on the organization's culture, like how you deal with such kind of reports. And sometimes, or most of the times, people basically avoid reporting these kind of incidents or weaknesses in the security environment, just because that breach or that weakness that they are reporting or want to report will affect their immediate line manager or supervisor. So they will never be able, they will not want to come into limelight. They cannot basically report against their supervisor or the manager. So there should be a mechanism or a process in an organization where you can ensure the anonymity of the person who is reporting the security weakness within the environment. If that is not there, no matter how effective your, because you see, like most of the times we put our efforts on acquiring a solution which can log a web-based solution or SMS-based solution or whatever it is. But the thing is, like, if all these systems are not ensuring the anonymity of the reporter, then no one will be willing to report any security incident or security breach or a weakness that is there in an environment. And ultimately, you will lose your control on the incident management program. Then the second important thing is, like, when you review the incidents, most of the times, a lot of times, like I have seen, like the people who are reviewing these security incidents, they deal with this information very improperly, I would say, because like if you start mentioning that this incident has been reported as security incident, whereas it was not a security incident. So if you keep on like replying back to the users in an organization, a common person in an organization who is not a technical expert in categorizing or analyzing whether this could be or should be categorized as a security incident or not, and you start replying back to them that we have received so many incidents, and out of those majority of the incidents, for example, giving them example and mentioning that were not security incidents, people will start thinking that okay, if those were not the security incident, that means I do not have to report the incident anymore, because that's what I was seeing as a security incident and my understanding was not good. So people will stop responding to these incidents. So this practice usually kills the culture, and it will affect your incident handling or incident response process, or what you can say, capability. Then vulnerability scanning is another area. Again, since it is a technical area, most of the time people are doing it in a, like relatively effectively. But the thing is, like, there are other issues associated with vulnerability scanning. Most of the times, you hire third-party service providers to run security scan, vulnerability scan across your networks, and you need to be very careful in contracting vulnerability scanning to third-party service providers. And if you do not draft your contract, if you do not draft your terms and conditions, if you do not put controls on those service providers, it will open a huge door for the weaknesses. And there are cases reported where the security breach has happened through the involvement of these third-party service providers who conduct security scanning or vulnerability scanning across your environment. So you need to be very careful while contracting. Your contract should be very clear, the scope, the requirements, what they can do, what they cannot do, what kind of a skill set you are looking from them to deploy, whether it should be in-house or it should be external. So these are the things like that you should see. There's a complete, you have to go through a complete process while you are engaging a third-party service provider to perform vulnerability assessment in your organization. Then information asset classification, again, you see, like wherever there are administrative controls, not non-technical controls, you will find that organizations are mostly suffering or lacking maturity on administrative controls or process controls. Information asset classification is again another area where usually companies or organizations do not put their efforts on. Either they categorize each and every piece of information as highly classified, or usually the people who are basically the data owners or the information owners, they do not have clear understanding, like what could be classified as highly classified information. I'm not talking about the labels, because labels again, what you can say, create ambiguity, like everyone start calling each and every document as a confidential document. So it's not about calling it a confidential or not. The important thing is, like, if something is classified as confidential, what is the protocol associated with this? If you classify any document as a classified, highly classified, like whether you call it confidential or top secret or whatever it is, whatever labels you are using in your organization, what will happen then? Like if you classify a document as a highly classified and then you circulate it across the organization over the email, that does not reflect that it is a classified information, because you are sharing it with everybody in the organization. So the protocol has to be set, and it has to be like the people who are basically dealing with information, who are considered as information owners within the organization, should be very, like, should be trained, should be provided awareness on information classification, and they should basically follow proper controls to deal with that classified information. Then we talk about forward intelligence. This is again another area. It depends, like not every organization. First of all, I would like to make a statement here that not every organization need to invest in forward intelligence. This is something which may be required with the very few organizations who are dealing or who are working in a highly sensitive area, which may be like where the national security may be involved kind of organizations. But these days we can see like a lot of vendors are selling approaches or solutions associated with forward intelligence. A lot of people are preaching about forward intelligence. Like I have seen, I have attended a presentation recently, and the person was like so keen to basically focus on forward intelligence, and he was like sharing his experience that the only tool he is using for forward intelligence gathering is Facebook. Now, like these are the ideas, evolving ideas, and you should not be, not every organization should be focusing on forward intelligence at the moment. There are so many other things that needs to be improved to ensure cybersecurity. Then we have architecture and technology hardening. Yes, of course, again, it's a technical area and it can be achieved very easily. And most of the organizations do basically put good efforts in hardening the architecture and technology. The only thing is at the architecture and technology hardening level is basically, or system hardening as well, which is the next area, is basically putting the security controls in the design of the uh, technology, like whether it is an infrastructure or it is an application, whatever it is. Like if the security is not built into the design of the security, after you build the system and then you think about security, it's too late to basically address the security. It is like you are creating, you are developing or constructing a house, and after you do not have the master plan, you do not have any component in the master plan of that construction. And at the later stage, when you have constructed the building or the house, then you thought about like, okay, I need an attached bathroom in this room. Now if you think about it, like what you have to go through to basically create an attached bathroom in with a room after constructing the whole house will be like it. Again, it is visible, so you can see like either it will affect the design of your house, or you will not be able to create it appropriately. So it's the same analogy you can use in a systems, like if you develop the system and then you start talking about thinking about technology security, and then you try to embed security controls in the software or system, then it's too late, and it will be like you will be going through and you will be basically from the first day compromising on something, the effectiveness of the security controls. So these are the areas where you need to basically put your investments in to put controls to safeguard cybersecurity. Now, another concept is basically controls shelf life. Now, whatever control you are putting, controls are implemented to address the threat environment and the operating infrastructure known at the time. And as threat environment change, so must the controls change. So there are so many things, there are so many changes happening. It's not only the one aspect that the operating system has been upgraded. It's not that the application has been changed in environment. There are so many other things that are happening in a business environment which needs to be considered and reviewed regularly to ensure that your controls are still relevant. For example, when we talk about administrative controls, when we talk about the policy. Now, if you have developed a policy and then the top management has been changed, like for example, the CEO of the organization, or CIO of the organization, or CISO, in fact, of the organization has been changed, you need to review the policies again, because you see that's a huge, these are the controlling positions, and when you change these controlling positions in the environment, the underlying processes, the practices also change in the organization. And when the practices change in the organization, you need to review your controls, you need to review your policies, you need to review your procedures, whether they are still effective enough to ensure security, or they need to be changed, or whatever changes are happening in the organization needs to be reflected in the controls. So this is the area, and you cannot rely on a control for a lifetime because changes are happening, and you need to enhance the controls throughout the life cycle of the control. Okay. The cybersecurity controls. Now we will talk about internal audit's role, like what role internal audit basically plays to ensure security. So basically, when we talk about security, when we talk about cybersecurity, there are multiple lines of defense. Okay, the first line is business and IT, control, self-assessment, then attack, break, penetration testing, functional technical testing, social behavioral testing, regular management reviews. These are basically the controls that are considered as first line control and that deal with the security at the at the front of the organization. Then we talk about second line, which is basically the risk management. Through risk management is considered as the second line of control because through risk management you will identify threats, vulnerabilities, and risks. There should be a formal risk evaluation, then business impact analysis should be done thoroughly and very carefully, involving the business itself into this exercise. And most of the times I have seen that people perform business impact analysis, and the results or the what you can say, the facts and figures they document as a business impact assessment does not reflect the reality, because most of the times the process owners from the business side do not have a clear understanding of what is required and how to assess the impact of any incident, and either they put everything at a very what you can say with a very high impact, or sometimes they neglect and they basically keep everything as a low impact activity. So most of the time the results of BIAs are not realistic. So before conducting a business impact analysis, again awareness should be provided to the business process owners, because they are the one who basically own the information and the business process, and then the business impact assessment should be conducted. And then of course you should keep an eye on emerging risks. What risks are emerging in the industry, what is coming, and your risk management should basically be should have the capability to handle the emerging risks as well. And then we come to the third line of defense, which is basically internal audit. Now, internal audit basically help ensuring internal controls testing. They may not be testing, because sometimes it is taken mistakenly that they are responsible to test the controls. They may not be able to test each and every control, but they can ensure that the testings have been performed properly. The right approach has been taken to test the controls. Then cybersecurity compliance, again, internal audit can ensure compliance with cybersecurity, because they are not the people who have developed the policies and the control environment, but they can for sure ensure the compliance with the defined policies and procedures in the organization. Then formal risk acceptances, they can make sure that in the risk management process the right stakeholders have been engaged, and they have understood the risks and they have given their acceptances, so they can ensure that the process of risk management has been implemented or performed thoroughly, and everybody involved in risk management has clear understanding like what they are dealing with. And then of course investigations and forensics is the another area which can be handled by internal audit team. So that's how we define multiple lines, 3 lines of defenses and internal audit, which is the topic of our today's webinar, that auditing cybersecurity controls. So basically internal audit department is sitting at the third line of control, and it is playing a very important role in ensuring cybersecurity in the organization. So what are the fundamental questions? Where is the best place to invest the next security dollar? Like, there are so many areas. I have given you an example, like there are more than 10 areas where investments are required to ensure cybersecurity. Now, you will not be able to put investments in each and every component or compartment of the cybersecurity. So that is something that can only be achieved like through the internal audits input. Where is the best place to invest the next security dollar? Which area is important? Which area is critical? Which area is most vulnerable? And where the weaknesses are in the organization, and where the investment should be made. Then the next thing is like, is the right amount being invested? Like these two questions are very distinct. Like first of all, where to put the investment, and whatever amount we are investing, is it the right amount? Because if you do not put the right amount, if you cannot calculate the right amount, or if you cannot give this you cannot give the clarity on the right amount of investment to the management, it will be very difficult for the management to basically see the benefits. And again, the question of ROI, return on investment, will be raised, and it will affect the security arrangement in the organization. Then, are there areas of risk that are not being addressed? Of course, this is the most important thing. Like you should be putting your efforts in the areas where the risks are not addressed. And are the dollars invested that we have today being used wisely or not? So, like monitoring or basically measuring the investment, what you can say, realizing the benefits of investment. This is the fourth point. Like yes, you know what in where you have to invest. You have answered like what is the right amount to invest. You have considered the risks, but at the later stage, whatever you have invested, has it been used wisely or not? This is something that will basically create or will satisfy the benefits realization aspect of the stakeholders, and it will ultimately address the return on investment, realization of return on investment for the stakeholder, for the business stakeholders. So these questions are best answered by evaluating the current and emerging risk to the organization, again through risk management, and auditing the security controls. So the idea of introducing these fundamental questions is to basically give an understanding to the auditors, like what their audit scope should cover in their cybersecurity audit, so that they can provide the value to the stakeholders. Okay, now we will talk about audit boundaries and the limitations. Like, okay, like you can see on your screens, like there is unrestricted audit scope, which is the organizational network. Then we have audit restrictions applies to the public network, because auditors cannot audit public networks. Then home networks are also there, which are partly considered as unrestricted, like unrestricted for the auditors, where they can perform some audit. And there is part of the home network, which is basically, again, which is connected to the public network, which comes with the audit restrictions, like audit cannot perform any audit activities on that. And data is flowing across these three networks: organizational network, home network, public network. So yeah, so work at home agreements permitting the audit of their environment is one thing that you can use to basically ensure, like if you are allowing users to access corporate information from their home, and if they are allowed to basically use their personal devices, for example, then there should be an agreement in place which allows, or which basically permit the internal audit to basically audit those environments and to put controls there. And then related to public networks, the right to audit clause in the contract security standard and certification. Like for example, if you are using a cloud environment, and the cloud is basically connected to the public network, and cloud is basically provided by the service provider. So if you are putting your applications, your data on a public cloud or any mostly public cloud, you should know, like, first of all, the risks associated with putting that corporate information to the cloud. That is the first thing. And based on the realization, like what you are putting on the cloud, you should perform your risk assessment, and you should basically put some controls in your contract with the service provider, because most of the times the service contracts people are signing with the service providers are designed to safeguard service providers' interest and liabilities. And most of the times the service acquirer do not basically put any requirements in those contracts, because they're not aware, they do not do their homework before what you can say purchasing these services or acquiring these services, and they just sign the contract that is drafted by the service provider. And of course, if the service provider has drafted the contract on terms and conditions, they will safeguard their interest only. They will not be signing safeguarding your interest as a service acquirer. So you should have appropriate controls in that contract available, and you should be very careful like what you are putting on those public networks, and how you will be able to audit that. That should be done as a homework before acquiring any service through the cloud. Okay, so now what is the cybersecurity audit scope? From the governance perspective, security policy and related technical key operating procedures should be covered in the audit scope. Then risk. From the risk perspective, risk register, like how many times it has been updated, what are the treatments, like whatever risk treatment options you have selected, have they been implemented according to the plan that was agreed. And the risk reporting in cybersecurity, how you are reporting the risks. So these are the aspects that should be covered in the audit scope from the risk management perspective. Then the management, the cybersecurity incident reviews, like is management reviewing, is somebody reviewing in the organization the cybersecurity incidents, and the people who are reviewing these, are they the right people to review those incident reports, security incidents? That is something that should be covered in the audit scope. And assurance, cybersecurity risk management process. You have to go through the complete risk management process itself, the process that has been taken. And a lot of standards and frameworks emphasize on documenting the risk management process just for the sake to ensure that it can be audited, it can be ensured that the risk management is being performed through a process which is repeatable. If the risk management process is not there documented, and every practitioner who is basically conducting the risk management is using his own style and practices, and if you change the process, the risk is like if the person is changed, the whole process will be changed, and as a result there will be a variation in ultimate risk profile of the organization. And if the risk management process is not documented, you will not be able to what you can say establish this fact that this variation is basically reflected the changed exposure of the organization, or it is only the practice that is changed in assessing the risk, which is reflected in the risk management results. And this is the audit's responsibility to make sure that risk management process is there, and risk is being assessed through a repeatable process. And if there is a change in the results of the risk management, the results are basically reflecting the changing posture of the organization's risk. Okay, now let's talk about security audit objectives. When we talk about cybersecurity goals, these are the goals that are listed there. We will go through them one by one. The first goal is basically cybersecurity policies, standards, and procedures are adequate and effective. This is the first starting point of the audit. What you should do, like verify the documentation is complete and up to date, confirm that formal approval, release, and enforcement are in place, verify that documentation covers all cybersecurity requirements, verify that subsidiary controls cover all provisions made in policies, standards, and procedures. So this is the scope of the audit. Like when you audit, when you review the security policies and procedures developed for the organization, and when you audit the adequacy and effectiveness of those policies and procedures, this is what you have to look for. You need to basically, the most important or critical part is to verify the documentation is complete and up to date. Most of the times you will find formal approval processes there, and there are multiple practices in different organizations. I would like to comment on one thing, like most of the times I have seen that people do not practice the appropriate level of approval. Like for example, for each and every security management policy, the documentation has been approved by the chairman of the organization, the CEO of the organization. I have seen it in so many cases, especially in Muscat. So the thing is, like if you are getting the operational policies, if you are basically getting the operational policies approved and signed by the what you can say, the chairman of the organization or chairman of the board, do you think the chairman understands the what you can say, implications, like what he or she is signing? Is it appropriate, first of all, at the first stage, to get it signed by the chairman? And the second thing is, like, it will create like, I will take it as an excuse, like everybody in the organization then take it as something is approved by the chairman of the organization, so it became a sacred document, so no one can challenge that document because it has been signed by the chairman of the organization or the board. And the second important from the operational perspective challenge is basically to keep those policies or documents up to date, because you see, it is very difficult to get hold of a chairman of the organization or the board to approve the updates in the document. So you have to wait for a long time. Usually there are different practices. Sometimes boards are meeting quarterly, sometimes they are meeting only twice in a year, and sometimes they are meeting only once in a year. So now, even if it is a quarterly meeting of the board, you have to wait for another 3 months to basically put your document for approval for the changes. And those change, you cannot implement those changes unless it has been approved by the approving authority. And you will keep your organization vulnerable and exposed to risks unless those documents have been updated, because we are seeing policies and procedures as an instrument, as a control to ensure cybersecurity in the organization. So you need to basically confirm that the document has been approved by the right level of authority, and then release and enforcement are in place, like documents have been released properly and enforced properly. So that is basically, that should be the objective of audit while auditing cybersecurity. Now, when we talk about the cybersecurity goal, which is emerging risk is reliably identified, appropriately evaluated, and adequately treated. So through audit, you need to confirm the reliability of the risk identification process again, assess the risk evaluation process, including tools, methods, and techniques that have been used to identify the risks or evaluate the risk. You need to confirm that all risk is treated in line with the evaluation of the results. That is very important. Confirm that the risk is treated in line with the evaluation of the results. So you need to basically, and organization's risk appetite come into play while confirming this. So you need to have a very clear understanding, like what is the organization's risk appetite and what is considered as the accepted risk and what is the threshold minimum level of that below that the risk may be considered by the management as acceptable, or above that will not be accepted. Then verify that the treatment is adequate or formal risk acceptance exists for untreated risks. So this is the role of the audit, to ensure emerging risk is reliably identified and appropriately evaluated and adequately treated. Then the third cybersecurity goal is cybersecurity transformation processes are defined, deployed, and measured. So audit's role is in this regard is to verify the existence and completeness of the transformation process and related guidance. Verify that transformation process is implemented and followed by all part of the enterprise. Like if you are making any changes to the security management system or control environment, that has to be taken care of very thoroughly and carefully. Then confirm controls, metrics, and measurement relating to the transformation goals, risk, and performance are there. Okay, so this is the role of audit, and then we will move on to attacks and breaches identified and treated in a timely and appropriate manner. That is the important thing. Again, it relates to the incident management and reporting. And I have told you earlier in the presentation that this is the area which lacks like most of the organizations. So audit can confirm that monitoring and specific technical attack recognition solutions are there. Then assess interfaces to security, incident management, and crisis management processes and plans. This is a very important area which needs to be taken care of. Like usually in organizations, from the business continuity perspective, the crisis management processes and plans are there. So the incident management plans or procedures should be integrated with the crisis management, because at some time it becomes a crisis and it has to be handled as a crisis within the organization. And then you need to evaluate on the basis of past attacks the timeliness and adequacy of attack responses. So it is basically the audit role to ensure incident management is performed in the organization appropriately. What you can use as a security control framework, there are so many frameworks, so you can use either one of them, or you can basically use them in combination. We have COVID-5 for information security, we have NIST cybersecurity framework, which is very detailed. Then we have NIST special publication for security and privacy controls, designing of security and privacy controls. This is there. Then we have 27001 series standards, and now 27001 usually referred to as the management system, but there are so many other standards available in this series. Like for example, 27005 is related to risk management, information security risk management. Then we have other publications in 27000 series which specifically deals with cybersecurity and the privacy of information. Then we have security Center for Internet Security CIS control library resources that can also be referred to basically refer as a framework, control framework for the cybersecurity. And then Information Security Forum, a standard of good practices for information security, is also available. So that's how basically you can what you can say use your information security control framework. And related to this, again, recently I was participating on an online forum, and someone from the audit department in some organization somewhere in the world asked that can I use COVID as a reference for my organization? And to support this question or this argument, he make a disclaimer that their IT department claims that they have not implemented COVID in their organization. So in this situation, can I use COVID as a reference as a control framework for auditing IT in the organization? So It depends on like what approach you are taking, because as an internal auditor you have a huge responsibility, and we have discussed it very clearly. We have established the like basic objective of audit is basically how to provide value to the stakeholders, how to provide assurance to the stakeholders that arrangements within the organization are appropriate enough. And to do that, you should not only be basically working, you have to basically do some homework. You can take reference from any of these frameworks, and you should create your questions and checklists. Of course, if you ask a very straightforward question, yeah, have you implemented COVID controls, the answer will be no, we have not implemented COVID controls. So the discussion ends here. This is not an appropriate question. The thing is, like, if you refer to the COVID provides control objectives for the complete IT environment, and you should refer to it. You should tailor your questions. You can draft your questions in a manner to basically identify the effectiveness of controls in different areas. And the second thing is, like, COVID, for example, if we take as an example of like overall overarching governance framework for the governance and management of IT in an organization. It basically defines what is required, and it does not go into the details of how it should be done. And it links to different frameworks when it comes to how how the practices should be carried out in a specific discipline. Like, for example, if we talk about security, cyber security or information security, COVID basically will help you to define what should be done to ensure security. For how element, there are different, and COVID refers to, for example, 27001 and NIST cybersecurity framework, to basically give you an indication that these are the frameworks that are that will be giving you the like a framework for how it should be managed, or how practice should be defined. Okay, so that's how you can utilize these different frameworks, and you can create your checklists, and you can create your questions to assess the effectiveness of controls or control environment in an organization. Then internal audit value contribution, again, independently assess program effectiveness, security program effectiveness, and then report risk management effectiveness to the board or to the major stakeholders, and comply with regulatory obligations related to cybersecurity risks. So these are the 3-point agenda for adding value or contributing value through internal audit when it comes to measuring the effectiveness of cybersecurity programs. That's it from my side. I think I managed to cover it up within the time, and if you have any questions, you can ask available in GoToWebinar now.
Yes, I have opened the question tab. The participants can ask the questions now. You can type in the questions from your side. Dear members, I have opened the question tab. Any questions coming
in? No, not yet.
Budget, getting budget controls. What is this? To conceive management is really tough task. They always ask.
To convince management is really tough task. They always ask whether whatever is okay. Let me open it.
Theoretically, they always ask whatever is regulatory compliance, implement that portion. Only as economic scenario is very tough. Theoretically looks good, but Getting budget for control is very tough.
Yes. Okay. So yes, it is very tough, but you see, like my experience is like it is okay. So you need to understand the complete equation or the complete scenario. If you are concerned about convincing the management on the investment required, you need to do the homework. That is one thing which is very important. And I have shared my experience with you that this is the area where I have seen weaknesses. Now, you see, like I have given you an indication that by regulatory requirements, the boards and the senior management of the organizations are basically accountable to ensure risks associated with cybersecurity. Okay, that is one thing. Now, you cannot say that they are not willing to invest in it. This is not the right statement. Since they have the accountability and this accountability has been set through regulations, so they cannot neglect this accountability. The only thing is like when you present your case, business case for investment, you do not cover, you do not most of the times people fail to basically map these what you can say, like the objectives or the benefits of that investment or the project or the plan program to the business benefits. And the people who are sitting in the management, in the board, they are not technical people. They do not understand technical jargons. Okay. Now, I have seen a business case for SIEM solution. SIEM solution is a very expensive solution these days. Okay. It's minimum required like 100,000 Omani Riyals investment in SIEM solution if you are acquiring a SIEM solution. Roughly average cost is like around that. And if you are asking for 100,000 Omani Riyal for a solution and you are only giving them the justification that it will make incident monitoring easier, that means you are giving them a very clear indication that through this investment you only want to make your own life easier as a security manager in your organization. Because this is what the business case is telling, like it will help you to basically identify security incidents easily or effectively. If you do not put if you do not map the benefits of this investment, business benefits of this investment, it will be very difficult for the business management or the board or the executive management to approve that budget. So yes, economic conditions and scenarios are there, but they have to basically, the senior management or the executive management, they have to deliver on their accountability. So if your business case make it easy for them to understand the risks involved, it will be easier for them to understand and to approve that budget. So that's my take, and that's how I suggest my clients to basically prepare their business cases. And this is the major reason why business cases are usually rejected by the management.
Another question is, since cybersecurity is very dynamic, how can we plan audits covering all areas?
Yeah, again, you see, like it's the nature of the business. So like I have already like are you going in sequence? Because I think in
Yes,
my
yes, I'm going.
yeah, what if an organization rejects to do a vulnerability analysis on ERP systems? Okay, this is the
Okay,
next
okay,
question that I am seeing here. Yeah. So
okay.
again, yes, you see, like you need to support, like if an organization rejects to do vulnerability, you see, the thing is like from these two questions, the most evident thing that I can sense is basically there are disconnects in different initiatives within an organization. Now, if you are asking for security investment in security, then you are not dealing with security as a program of course you will face this challenge. Like if you go to the management on project basis, initiative basis, and you do not give them an overall view like what the program will look like. That's what I have covered in my presentation at the earlier slide, that you need to take security as a program in an organization. That is very important. And it is very evident that if you are facing this problem, yet you are asking for budget in bits and pieces. Like one day you are asking for vulnerability analysis, the other day you are asking for another component, and then the other component. Since these components you are dealing like in individuality, it does not give an impression that where you want to go. If you put them in an order and if you create a program which can give the management a clear understanding like how you are going to handle cybersecurity in an organization, what will be the components, where are the risks, where are the gaps, and what all will be required stage by stage to achieve the high level objective of securing an organization against cybersecurity threats, it will not be the same response that you will get. Now, if I move on to the next, I wanted to ask about convincing management for controls. I think this is what I have already explained. The third question, is the publication available? Yes, the publications, whatever I have referred to in this slide are available. Since cybersecurity is very dynamic, how can we plan audits covering all areas? Okay, this is what you were referring to, Sayeda. Yes, the thing is like again, you need to prepare, and to be very honest, don't take it personally. I have seen auditors that have been using the same checklist that they have acquired from somewhere, and they are following the checklist in their organizations. If you acquire a checklist, if you do not develop a checklist to satisfy information organization cybersecurity needs, audit needs, this is what you will be basically facing. So cybersecurity as a discipline, as a practice may be dynamic, but organizations' need are unique and remain somehow constant. So you need to basically understand organizations' need. You need to develop security audit plans in response to organizations' risk posture or risk profile. Then it will not be very difficult.
One last question
We'll
will
move on
take.
to the. Okay, so time constraint. I will take only the last question. The last question. It is the last question that I am taking, or you are referring to the last question in the list?
No, last question you are taking.
Okay. So who should approve IT and
If you can
security
answer everything
policy?
in that study.
Yeah, it will be difficult. So basically now the question that I am taking is who should approve IT and security policy if it is not the board chairman? Okay, yes, very important and very critical question. The thing is, like you see, like in an organization, if you look at the organizational hierarchy, throughout the organizational hierarchy, the roles and responsibilities are defined, and accountabilities and responsibilities are also defined. Just to make it very clear, like for example, under the CEO, there are different positions like Chief Financial Officer, okay, Chief Operating Officer, and then Chief Human Resource Officer, maybe you can call it, or Chief Risk Officer. Now, under the CEO is accountable to run the organization, but when it comes to financial matters, CFO is accountable. Okay, for the organization, CEO is accountable, but from the financial matters perspective, CFO is accountable. So whatever is related to manage finance and accounts in an organization, CFO should be the person because he bears the accountability. Now, if you are taking the financial matters related policy to the chairman, that means it gives an indication that the organizational structure or the what you can say the organizational environment culture in the organization is not appropriate, though CFO is accountable by the title to deal with financial matters, but he is not assigned the authority to take up financial matters. That's why the documents are being sent to the chairman of the organization for approvals. So this is the principle that should be used. Like, for example, from IT perspective, IT manager is responsible, head of IT is responsible to approve IT policies. Like, for example, access control policy. No, IT manager is responsible to define access control policy. Like, CFO is not capable enough and should not be putting any comments on access control policy. The CEO of the organization should not be putting any comments on the policy. If these roles cannot put any comment and they could not contribute any value to this policy, access control policy of the organization, then why they are basically asked to sign those policies as an approver? Okay, so if you use this analogy, if you use this approach, you can easily identify within your organization based on the culture of the organization, like who should be the appropriate person to approve, like whoever has the accountability to manage that area should have the authority to sign the policies related to that area, and it will become very easier for you to manage as well. So I think that's what I would like to add for this question. And since it was the last question, over to you, Sayeda.
If participants have any other questions from you, they can email you and get your.
Yeah, sure. My email address is there, and you can just write to me anytime regarding your questions, and I will try to respond as quickly as possible.
Thank you so much for a wonderful presentation, sir. If you could
My
stop
pleasure.
your screen sharing, we'll go for quiz.
Saida, please note the time also. It's 8:23 now. So please, please make it within that time, please. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I
So
have
yes, I have stopped.
Stop the screen sharing. I have shared the code and the link in the ISACA Muscat chapter group. I request all the participants to join in for the quiz. If you can stop the screen sharing, sir, I will share
Yeah, I have
my
already
screen.
stopped, I think. Yes. Yes, I have stopped. Yeah.
Okay, but here I'm not able to.
Okay, just a minute. Change. You need to change the presenter. Okay, wait. Yeah. Actually, there are three organizers without the name. I have stopped it already. No one sees my yes.
Okay.
Now you need to basically go to the change presenter and you need to basically select it for yourself, and then your screen will be shared.
Okay.
Saida, please note the web address given by Mari, www.menti.com.
Yes, I had already shared in the group.
No,
So
there
participants
is
are joining.
Yeah, there is a small correction to that sent by Mr. Mari. New URL, www.menti.com.
Yeah. So we'll be starting in few seconds. We're letting the participants join. They're joining now. Please join, all of you. There are 60 participants, and I see very few here who have joined so far. So I'll be joining in another 10 seconds, starting the quiz in another 10 seconds. Okay, I'll start the quiz now.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because we're running short on time. ISACA defines internal control as the policies, the procedures, the practices, the organization structures, all of the above.
എത്ര ഫോൺ വെച്ച് ഈ ഉണ്ടാക്കുന്നത് കൊള്ളാമല്ലോ എന്താ എന്റെ പുസ്തകം വായിക്കാൻ
കേൾക്കാം.
Collection of integrated processes designed to deliver value to you have to write your answer here. Stakeholders is the correct answer. What's this? How internal audit contribute to stakeholder value? Independently assess program effectiveness, report risk management effectiveness to the board, cybersecurity risk, regulatory obligations, compliance, all of the above. Thank you. Congratulations, Mr. VT. We'll take the first 5 as winners, inshallah. Kindly please take few minutes to rate the webinar.
ഇവിടെ നിന്ന് അവിടെ നിന്ന്
I hope all have answered. Some are still answering. Thank you very much, all. Thank you, Amir sir, for a wonderful session, and hope to have few more in future from you, hopefully in coming quarter. Over to you, Manoj sir, for a formal vote of thanks. Manoj sir, are you there?
Yeah. Thank you, Saida. Good evening, my friends. Hope this Saturday weekend evening of the attendees is enriched with valuable inputs given by Mr. Amil Jamil on the subject auditing cybersecurity controls. Mr. Amil was a great support for the chapter while he was here working here in Oman, and he is carrying on the legacy still. Dear Mr. Amir, on behalf of ISACA Muscat Oman chapter, kindly accept our sincere thanks for giving us this knowledge sharing session. I would like to thank His Majesty Oman for the benevolent support to the professional community here, and thanking our sponsor, College of Banking and Financial Studies, for their continuous support. In addition, let me express my gratitude on behalf of the chapter to the board members and the attendees of the membership community. Thank you and good night. Over to Saida.
Thank you very much, all. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in for a knowledge series, and hope to have you all with us in this webinar initiative. We would like to give the CPEs to our members in this current situation, and then we'll stick to this mode of imparting knowledge. Inshallah, most probably will be coming up again in coming weeks, more webinars. Please join us to make the most of it. Thank you, Amir sir, for agreeing to give a webinar on a short notice. We can always count on you as usual.
Thank you very much for
And one
inviting me.
positive thing happened is that due to Corona, we could get in touch and get you back with us again.
Yeah, I'm always
Thank you.
available.
And then,
Thank you very much, Amir, for the great support, great help to the chapter.
yes,
We would like to have you for more webinars in the future.
Sure, I will continue
yes,
participating.
please,
Yeah, thank you.
yes, please
Thank
give
you,
us
Saida,
your
for
next date as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you, all the
members.
members.
Thank you so much. Have a good night. Stay safe. Avoid public places. Wash your hands thoroughly. Hopefully, all best wishes to your families. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Saida.
Thank you, Biju sir and Manoj sir, for your
Thank you,
support.
Saida.
And thank you, both Muscat. Thanks a lot. Take
Good
care.
night.
Assalamu alaikum.
Bye.
Good night. Assalamu alaikum. Good night, sir. Thank you very much,
Good night.
Amir.
Thank you. Bye.
Assalamu alaikum. Good night.
Bye.